I've been on a recent Warhammer bender recently, and of the books, the novels that I've read as of late, three of them have caught my special attention, as in I've nearly read the entirety of them in a single day each. Those books being Leviathan, Genefather, and of course The Infinite and the Divine, because my blood raven loving ass, of course, likes hearing Trazyn. Regardless, that intrigue that I feel from them isn't really what we're after today. And instead, today what we're going to be talking about, since I have not uploaded any sort of spooky Halloween content as of this month, what we're going to be talking about is the pacing of genre and mystery stories. My name is Han River. Welcome to my storytelling method. Now, side note, ignore or don't the footage in the background. It's just simply me playing Terraria in expert mode. I finished my normal mode run a while back, like at the beginning of September, end of August. And I've just been kind of sitting on going on ahead with the next higher difficulty. Because, of course, I'm going to treat it like Dark Souls. Regardless, that's just going to be in the background for anyone who cares. Now, starting out with horror. Horror deals with preying upon your fears, dealing with the unknown. It deals with the intrigue of wanting to know more, even though you know it's probably not a good idea. That there's probably something that you're going to end up finding that you're not going to like. Let us take, for instance, the book Dracula by Bram Stoker. Now, normally I don't think that this would classify as horror to us modern people, but to people, I'll get into also that perspective in a minute. But for now, the book Dracula deals with an ageless monster who consumes humans to sustain itself. And the only reason that he hasn't been more of a threat is just because he's been contained to his castle for all these years. Until our first protagonist is brought forward to essentially fill him in on the things that have happened and conduct a business deal with him. The protagonist, as the first half of the book progresses, finds things are odd. For one, his host was able to sneak up on him while he was trying to shave or just do things within the restroom. He didn't see the reflection in a mirror and got spooked by the sudden appearance. Very weird, but I mean, man could just have that sort of aura to him. I can't say aura in this day and age without, like, the memes. He never really sees his host eat. His host seems to always eat before him and is full when dinner comes around. He feels weaker as the days progresses and notices a couple of holes in his neck. Very odd, and it's odder that it's not healing or bleeding. And as his realizations begin to grow, he eventually realizes that the people, the gypsies visiting the castle, are in on it, and that his host is a monster. We don't hear back from him until the second half of the book, after Dracula decides now is the time to leave. And leave he does. They based an entire movie around the absolute terror that he became once he got to some point of civilization. The Demeter. The ship that ran aground on the mainland and brought him to the second half of the story. He tore that entire place apart. The captain, like, the logbook, I believe, that was read off within the Book of Dracula itself are just bits and pieces, and the movie of the Demeter I imagine is probably close to what they actually experienced and felt on that ship. Of course, this is a work of fiction. Saying on that ship is in reference to the characters themselves that we admittedly don't see. We just get the logbook of it, of what happened. But you also get my point in this case. Now, looking at it from, say, the perspective of V Rising, for anyone who's played that or seen my solo footage of it. Because anything with my friend is going to be too full of yapping to actually make sense of. Looking at V Rising and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of one of the villagers, the townsfolk, the farmers. What we're looking at is that you all have a home somewhere in the countryside or in the village itself, alright? Now, that doesn't matter. Both in the past, before the Luminance, before Dr. Henry, before most of that stuff, and even now, with the rise of your player character Vampire and the Nocturne Legions in the east directions, you are at the whims of ageless monsters that are stronger than you, faster than you, and can use abilities to sniff you out, outpace you much quicker, and tear through any defenses or tank any sort of, weakness that they could normally have. Looking at how bear form seems to resist things a lot more. There's not much you can do. They will get into your house to eat you. They will pillage your entire homestead and tear it to the ground for whatever resources they need for their next nefarious scheme. Or they're just going to toy with you, because even in the case of Bram Stoker's Dracula, we see that vampires is scions of Dracula, even, especially considering the one that was turned, are especially playful with their food. They love tormenting people. Cunts. Regardless, a horror deals with things that your protagonist cannot normally win against. Your character's goal is going to just be to survive. And the high points of your novel are going to either consist of realizations about the threat, or either your character managing to fend off whatever horrors come for them, in the case of, say, Resident Evil games, dealing with a wave of zombies or whatever, having to back off because they've been injured by whatever's jumped them, say, one of those brain-looking leapers from Resident Evil 2, a few of which stalk the police station, or having to run for their lives because Mr. X coming for them. Mr. X gonna give it to him. There we go. Otherwise, yeah, horror is not a winnable game. Heck, I'm pretty sure the book Leviathan that I mentioned at the start of all this would technically count, because if you think about the Tyranids as the existential threat they are all-devouring, numerous, and they blew up the planet with only 5 people, 2 Space Marines and 3 normal people, surviving to tell the tale. That's how bad the situation got. And yet I would classify it more as an action book of some sort. Mainly because that's just how Space Marines roll. Now, looking at mystery books, they have a similar sort of insidiousness to them. However, the goal of a mystery book is not about the thrill of the unknown, the horror that is contained within whatever your protagonist is investigating. Instead, mystery books are more about the process of the discovery, of the intrigue behind who could have done whatever it is. They can contain those surreal elements and contain a threat that can't normally be beaten, but they're not the focus. Let's take, for instance, Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. It is a novel that has 10 people go to an island for a party. None of them know each other. I think 2 know each other solely by occupation, but otherwise, they're at most acquaintances. No one has any clue who the people who called for them here are. They acted like they were friends and family. And then, as everyone realizes collectively that their host is not in fact any of them, and even present on the island, they begin to try to devise a way off, only to realize that the next boat to come to the island is going to be 3 days off. The youngest in the room decides to just go ahead and celebrate anyways. They're here, so they might as well. Insidious things aren't always, just meant to be bad, so let's drink. He is the first to die. And thus the game begins, as all of the people we swap between the perspectives of everyone who is left on the island, either in the moments leading up to their deaths, or as they look around, investigate, and talk to other people on the island, trying to figure out who the killer is. Eventually, it comes down to 3 people and 1 suspect. One of the 3 people ends up getting taken out, and then they find the suspect dead on the beach, leaving the last 2 people to look at each other. That one of them is the killer. They duke it out, and the last person is left standing. She goes back to the house and hangs herself. And then there were none. Title card. Regardless, mystery books are, as I said, about the intrigue, the process of trying to piece together. And you, as the reader, are either going to realize the actual secret of the book, either before the character does, because your intuition is sharp enough to realize, yeah, it's probably that character. You're going to figure it out through the actions and knowledge of the protagonist, because some things are a bit too esoteric for just the regular person to go through in their thought process, unless they're like an active reader of that particular series. For instance, Dresden Files, which I highly recommend. In a case study of those books, the second book, he has to identify the several different types of werewolves and figure out which kind was the one to do it. Of course, one type, which is a enchanted belt meant to transform people into wolves, is trying to frame the biggest, baddest, and scariest kind of werewolf of them all. Delightful. And White Knight, I believe, where Harry Dresden has to infiltrate a film and has to figure out how the people are dying, eventually dictating that it is the leader of the White Court vampires, with how many of them are showing up in that book, and that they are using a ritual to essentially send bad luck death at people every noon and midnight. It is very much bad luck death. It's very much so funny, that one. And it's also something that none of us would normally know about. Like, the fuck is the White Court of Vampires? To any of us. The third way is, of course, when the author decides to just explicitly tell you. Because in the case of going back to And Then There Were None, how are we supposed to know who the killer is? We're not even sure. It's like, we're pretty certain it's not the last person in the very end of it all, because I mean, you think the killer, in inviting everyone and trying to do all that, would be thrilled. They accomplished their mission. They would not hang themselves. So, in the end, the final section of the book is a letter cast in a bottle that the true killer ended up writing and casting to sea in order to make their own intentions known. They said that there were 3 giveaways to it, and one of them makes sense for motive reasons, and the other we would not, as the reader, really suspect, because the person, they had an accomplice, but we wouldn't suspect that accomplice because they are a professional in their field. Which is why they made the perfect, like, alibi, basically. But, until the very end, and unless you're actually looking for something like that to factor into your own equations, no, yeah, you're not suspecting it whatsoever. Regardless of, like, the lack of twist, or, well, I would say satisfaction in, like, revealing whodunit during the actual mystery itself, it's still a really good read. But, yeah. Horror, as a genre, preys upon your fear of the unknown, of your weaknesses, and attempts to give you the thrill of a read or of a gameplay, because you're having to face insurmountable odds and, at most, survive by the skin of your teeth. Meanwhile, mystery is more about the process of putting together whatever clues to whatever you're trying to solve, be it a murder, a robbery, something. Heck, you could be looking into trying to piece together lost information about some treasure. That also tends to be mystery, because imagine the intrigue of various factions vying for the information so that they can get to whatever end goal it is first. There's going to be murder, there's going to be suspense. As, like, say, negotiations of trading information or alliances either can hold shakily or break down entirely. As you can tell, I like mystery more than I do horror, because unless I'm able to actively shoot whatever monster is in my direct path in, say, a horror game, I'm generally not going to be inclined to play it. As anyone can tell from when I immediately ran out of the maze during my playthrough of Snipe Hunt. Regardless, though, that is how the pacing of horror and mystery books is affected by their particular like, genre. I've been Hyman Prism River. Thank you so much for listening to me yap about stories for, like, the past 20 minutes. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.